Welcome to another week of The Inimitable Black Woman. I'm your host, Donna, and yay, if this is your first time here, welcome. I love to say that there are refreshments and snacks in the back, so go ahead, feel free, go get some out your fridge. You know what I'm saying? And imagine I'm giving you a hug. It's Black History Month, man. Hugs. I give hugs every month, but I'm just acknowledging it. It's also Black History Month. This week is a little different. I was interviewing Jasmine, and it basically turned into a conversation. So I was like, listen, this conversation's dope, so let's keep it. So this week I'm calling this one Black Women Talking. And it's the title is This Conversation of Black Women Talking. It's Jesus, Politics, and John Gray. So it gets interesting, you know what I'm saying? But take a listen to this. I'm going to just do it all in one part. But if you go to the IBW Instagram page, you can see the video of the interview broken up into two parts. So let's jump into it.
If it's interesting, I should just record it and maybe I'll cut it in pieces or something later. But
Yes.
I have personally been obsessed with looking at people's prophetic words saying that Trump was going to get elected for 4 more years.
Yeah.
Because I went back to this old post that was posted 37 weeks ago. There's this guy that I follow who's a prophet, who says he's a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
I read his book. He felt genuine, and he had made a prophetic word about Trump. So when Trump didn't win, right, I was curious to see what people were saying. And so now it's either one, I saw one pastor apologize. He apologized, and I do think it takes humility to apologize about something like that so public that you're wrong. I think my problem with it, and I think it speaks to maybe a bigger issue within him, is he was I want to say I've never had to do this before. I've never had to go back on a prophetic thing I've said, and I hate that it's making me look like I'm not prophetic or something like this, and it's so it's kind of in a way it's you apologize and then you do this kind of backhanded thing about yourself instead of just fully pressing into the humility of what this was asking, what this caused you to do. And sorry, I could go, girl, I've been looking at it, and some people have just dug their feet in, and they're now saying, well, it's going to happen eventually, or they're saying there's a lying spirit or we're all wrong. Well, maybe there's a lying spirit.
There is a lying spirit, and I think Christians should be very careful about what they prophesy and what they say, because they don't know. And I think, some people say, oh, it's an in-season word. But I believe that humans put their own opinions on what they think that God should be saying. And so I think they've convinced themselves that that is what it's supposed to be. And I've been there where I've convinced myself that something, not as something as politics, but I've definitely convinced myself of things in my life. And so I think that's where it comes from. But what it's showing us about white evangelical Christians is that they care more about their whiteness than they do their Christianity. And they can talk all day about their Christianity and say that they are voting that way because of pro-life. Well, if you were pro-life, then you would also care about the African-American full-grown woman and man that gets killed by the police. Because if you don't care about both, then your sentiment is contradictory. And if you want to say, okay, Republicans go the most with Christian views, how? Republicans don't want to give anything to people in poverty. Well, Jesus' ministry was all about people that lived in poverty. He really cared about the sick and the poor. So, and if we're talking about those two things, then they contradict each other. And we have Kenneth Copeland was laughing on
I saw that.
And Paula White was praying and trying to call down African angels. And it's at this point, you are showing us exactly who y'all are. I knew that conservative white Christians, I knew that there was always a thin line between them. And I never understood it, because if you understood the whole point of Christianity, if you understood the whole point in wanting to have a relationship with God, then you would try to be like Jesus, right? That is your main objective. Well, none of you guys are acting like Jesus. None of you. Jesus would go against the people that were in the government. He would say that y'all are doing things wrong. He
Yeah.
would go against that. And so to see all of this happening, I'm not surprised. I am glad that it's coming out. I want people to see this because I want people to understand that there are some issues within that religion, and some people try to placate their own political views and say that they're Christian and that they align completely with Christianity, but they don't. They really don't.
You know, and that's what's so scary, right? Because like someone like a Paula White, someone like a Kenneth Copeland are like put on the tons, right? The guy I'm talking about is a guy from Bethel, who Chris Valentin or something like that. And I will say, so what I remember about him and what I remember, because I do believe God speaks to us, but I do believe you really do have to be in a place where your heart is being constantly checked, because you're exactly right. Because we can put something into something, or we can change and manipulate things to fit what we want. So for instance, with him, I was listening to a sermon from Bethel, and I just got into kind of Bethel stuff. Like my friend goes to the church out here in Austin. And so that's why I was like trying to check out their stuff. And I was listening to Chris Valentin's sermon. I had never really heard of him. And I remember in the middle of the sermon that I'm listening to, he goes, but you know what? This was like a year or two ago. He goes, I don't know how old the sermon was, but this was about a year or two ago. And he goes, but we're making things different. We're making America great again, aren't we? And people started cheering. And I want to speak to this with you, because as a Black woman, right, and a Black Christian, one, like, as anyone who doesn't agree with that, that's jolting. But it was so upsetting, because it was just another example how being Black within this world of Christianity, there's always a feeling of not really belonging to these groups. Like literally when they talk about Christians, they're not referring to Black Christians. They're always referring to white Christians. And it's like, you're not even seeing us. Like we're not even a factor. We're a factor only when we agree with what you're doing. Like we're basically not acknowledged in the Christian community, in the sense of like where our votes go. Like, yes, I am a Black woman, but before all else, like, I am a Christian woman. You know? And so like that part of me, y'all don't like, I just feel like that's a thing though. Like we are constantly in environments where like we have to hear things from white pastors, and we just have to chew the meat, spit out the bones. All right, no, what is it? What's the saying? It's like chew the meat, spit out the bones, or like,
yeah, I think so.
Basically we have to pick out the meat of the message. We have to see like the greater good in the message and Jesus in the message, and just like kick out the things that you said that are offensive or hurtful. And
but
so
I think that's why we're separate. That's why we don't go to church in the same. Some of us do, but for the most part, Black people go to church with Black people. White people go to church with white people. The only time I stepped out of that is when I was in Charlotte, and I went to Stephen Furtick's church. Because he doesn't say stuff like that. When Charleston 9 happened, when Dylann Roof went into the church and killed those 9 people, Stephen Furtick scratched his entire sermon for Sunday and wanted to talk about race, and talked about, this hurts me so much because the Black church accepted me. They let me be in the choir. He showed us a video of him in the choir at a Black church. He was like, they accepted me with open arms. And so pastors like that, I can relate to and say, oh, okay, like now we're here. Or pastors that don't even bring up their political views within that space. But I think one of the biggest reasons we are separate is because we look at the Bible a different way. We have a different experience, so we need God in different ways. One of my friends one time, she said, it's almost as if white people want God, Black people need God. And I've ever since she said that, I've thought about that experience and how that goes into the Christian experience, right? How we are constantly like, God, like, I need you to, like get, like, how else am I supposed to break this ceiling? How else am I supposed to go into the workplace or the things that I'm doing if I am not praying, if I don't have a relationship with God? And so ever since she said that, I've been thinking about our experiences and how they are vastly different. because our lives is different. When you have a life of privilege, you can say things like that. Because America was great for you. It has always been great for you as a white male. But for a Black woman, hearing that, I would have walked. If I was in that church and I heard that was said, I would have walked out.
But here's the thing. He said that so freely, probably not even considering, not even thinking the people who don't agree matter.
Yeah.
Like it's basically doing that without taking into consideration the experiences of your Black congregation. You wonder why the church looks mainly white. It's because you don't include us. And so I remember that day I was like, so if I cry, I think it's because I'm just in a weird, like, sensitive place. I don't know. But it's like, it just hurts me so much. But I remember, like, I was praying to God, and I'm like, God, like, why is it that, like, these people, like someone like him who has this huge platform is making the money, is being seen, is being respected, is out on these huge platforms saying such hurtful, such terrible things, and not even considering others. And I believe when how I hear God, and because I was struggling, and I felt like God told me, you know, people make decisions, they make choices, and in the sense that that's a choice by him. Just because he made that choice to say that doesn't mean it was of God. That means that was a man that made a choice.
Wow. Oh, that's deep.
That's deep, right? Because it's real. Because when we're talking about these people who, like you were saying, who are speaking this prophetic word, they're making choices.
Yeah. With their own interest.
Exactly.
Within their own
exactly
interest.
what you were saying.
Because Paula White is Trump's spiritual advisor. I'm not sure, and I've seen her pray for him before. She's probably getting a check, and so when it comes to that, then of course, and what I think what's crazy is white women constantly, always vote against themselves in elections. You do realize that nothing that is happening with the views and what they're trying to do and their platforms benefits you as a woman. It doesn't benefit you. But because they're so loyal to a political party, they're trying to say it's about Christianity, but it's not. How is one part of somebody's platform about Christianity? It's not. It is not. I don't think it is. And I think people have to stop saying that. I think it's a cop-out. I think you should really be honest about how selfish you are in your views and how conservative your views are. Be honest about that and stop trying to put Christianity on that. Because I know God is in heaven like, hey, no, I didn't say that. What do you mean? I didn't mean that.
They're literally digging their feet in. And it's just, I was just thinking, I'm like, man, like, you know, because ultimately, like, God is always at work, right? So it's like, God allowed Trump to be president during that time. And I was thinking, I was like, well, I wonder if it was to expose all of the brokenness within the people, within the Christian community. And it just, you know, and it's always been a thing that I would say as a Black woman, and you probably can relate, that we knew.
Oh yeah.
We knew, but we would say it and people were playing nice. So so what they do is go, oh, you're making that up. That can't be true. Gaslighting us in a way.
Yes.
But what happened with Trump is that it was so blatantly out there. It's like, you can't even deny it, but you still will.
You still deny it. You'll say.
You still will.
You'll try to say he's not racist and he does this.
Oh
and
my gosh. You can show examples and you still, it's crazy, right? Like, I'm blown away because it's so many churches. So many churches with big platforms doing this. White churches, of course.
And I wonder how in the world do people that think like that get the opportunity to have those type of platforms? And we could say privilege, but if we're being honest, Paula White didn't show up on our screen or didn't show up in our lives until T.D. Jakes put her on that platform.
Right.
He gave her that opportunity. Did he know all those views? Because no, he couldn't have known when he put her in that platform. But I'm wondering, how do these type of people get platforms to the point where they are able to spew these types of things? Like, Paula White, hundreds of thousands of people in a church. Kenneth Copeland, he's on TBN every single week. How? And I think it begs to ask the question of, where is your heart? Insecurities, views, evilness, all of that is amplified when you have positions of power, and when you have positions where you are able to have a voice. All those things are amplified. When you first start off, those things are not amplified yet. But when you start getting power, you realize somebody is listening to me. It is, like you said, God said, it is your choice what you're going to say. You know that you have power, and you decide to put your opinion and to use that. And I know for a fact, none of them went into their prayer closet and said anything. God, how should I respond to this? How should I do that? I know for a fact. And it's honestly embarrassing to me as a Christian to see that people do that, because to people that are on the fence about Christianity, to the people that are barely going to church, to the people that don't even have a relationship with God right now, to them it looks like that this is what Christianity is. This is what that looks like, and I'm not going to ever go near that. I'm never going to walk into that space, because if that's what it's about, then I don't want to do it. It makes people that are on the fence about Christianity say no. And that's the scary part, because there are evil people in the church setting, both local churches, there are people that have a different type of mindset and that don't operate in the same way and loving way that you're supposed to. There are. And so for the people that have already seen that and experienced that, and then they see Paula White and Kenneth Copeland doing that, how many people do you lose? Because at the end of the day, so many people support that.
I think you point out such a big thing, because ultimately, like, our witness is how we communicate Christ to people. And I will say, as someone Black, to try to communicate Christ to other Black people when the leaders and who are claiming Christianity and claiming God are acting like this, like, I get it. Like, as someone Black being like, no, like, I'm not, y'all don't accept me. This is how you talk about things. This is what you stand for. People's walk is showing people terrible examples of, like, Christ. Because the reality is, from what I've seen in my past, a lot of people who turn away from Christ, they base it on past experiences with people who claimed Christ. Mm-hmm. People who said they stood for something. That's a lot of it. The hypocrisy in people has really turned people away. And it's so I'm at the point in my walk where, like, I don't care someone who claims Jesus on the high road. Like, I love TD Jakes. And if TD did something, which he wouldn't.
He wouldn't. I love him. Good intentions at all times.
But he's human, right?
Yeah, so that's
true. If he did something, that's not going to turn me away from Jesus. There's literally nothing anyone can do to turn me away from my personal walk.
Mm-hmm. And I think you have to get to that point in your walk, right? There are people that went to the same church that I did growing up that did not have the same experience, or experienced different things there, or experienced evil people, experienced a lot of things. And for the longest, I was like, well, I don't understand. Like, I didn't get that. And then I really started to think about it. Just because your experience was like that does not mean that somebody else was the same. And you can't, just because you didn't experience that type of church hurt, doesn't mean that you cannot empathize. And so what I started to do was really listen and understand, okay, now I get it. And, a lot of people make this argument of, they'll say, oh, you go to church, you go to your job, and you might not like your job, but you go there for a paycheck. Well, you can't use that analogy when it comes to church, because where I am getting paid is very different from where my soul needs to be saved. And if where I'm getting my soul saved is a toxic environment, then for a person that is not completely strong in faith, that will turn you away. And even if you are strong in faith, you might stop going to church and miss that connection because of the experience you had. And so church hurt is like a huge thing. And like you just said, everybody that has an issue, most of the people that I've met that have had an issue with Christianity has been the hypocrisy of people. But on the other side of that, they've either had something very, very traumatic happen to them, and they have not gained the understanding of why that happened. Or they feel the need to know, God, why did you take them? Why did I have to lose this person in my life? Why did they have to die? I see that with both sides. Hypocrisy and trauma really will make people say, no, I don't want to do that. And I just have to realize that what people do, like you said, is their choice, and that everybody is not completely healed. I'm not even completely healed. I'm still on the journey.
Oh, I know I'm not.
But in my healing, I wouldn't say some of the things that other people say. I just wouldn't. That's just me. And so I just often wonder,
when you say that, meaning like the things that are very, when you say you just wouldn't say the things that other people say, what do you mean by that?
Just very extreme, just very like not aligned with my way of thinking that God, has for us. I just would not share those things. And I believe that when people in power, when people have these huge platforms, they have to be careful what you say. And that's for everybody. Everybody that has a platform right now when it comes to Christianity, I know that there's a burden there. Like, oh my gosh, like not only do I gotta watch what I say, but I have people watching me and I have shepherd under me. With that type of responsibility, you cannot play with that. And I think a lot of people wanted that power and that platform so bad, more than they wanted to bring people to Christ. Do you want to bring people to Christ, or do you want to bring people to think the way that you think? Two different things.
And I think
vastly different.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to why you see Christianity play such a big role in politics, because I think it's all about the power, right? The power to control people. If I can control you through, because here's the thing, Jesus didn't even contribute laws to us. Like the whole reason that Jesus Christ died on the cross is because we could never fulfill the law. Laws were never going to be something that we could live up to. And so Jesus died so that like all of our sins, what we call our sins, are sins that are against, basically you can correct me, but I would say like our sins are basically the product of going against the law or the standard of Christ. And because we could never live up to that law or that standard, he died covering all of our sin so that we can walk in grace, and so that we can walk in a way where it doesn't matter what we do. It matters, but nothing that we will do will ever separate us from the love of Christ.
Yes.
So if Jesus, God, saw that laws, saw that making, what's the word? Like augmentations, that's probably the wrong word, but like basically making visual or doing certain things to look a certain way, it's never going to work. It's never going to work. So the idea of Christians wanting to control the laws in order to make people be Christian, or to make America Christian, which America is not the only place in the world, first of all. So like this, for them to think that they can use laws to bring Christ back in a bigger way is completely wrong. And it's dismissing the fact that Christ's number one thing was he wanted relationship with us. He wanted to speak to our hearts and to who we are inside and the deeper parts. So y'all are trying to change things on the outside. Y'all are trying to augment things, and I think augment is not the word, but y'all are trying to fix it by being like, okay, well, if you just be quiet, then like that means you are humble. It's like, no, that doesn't mean you're humble. Just because you have this law here and people can't do this, that doesn't mean all of a sudden they're Christian. That just means you tried to control their actions. Control.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think that they have used religion for. I mean, religion was used to control slaves. They tore out the pages where freedom was there, where the children of Israel got out of slavery. They tore those pages out, and they used it as a means of control. And when I think about the church, at the basis of it, some people, definitely more than others, definitely use it. They use the Bible as a means of control. Any type of church that automatically in the beginning of their message, or even in the end, the middle, they talk about all the things you can't do. I always side-eye. You can't do this, and you don't need to do this, and you don't need to do this. What you need to do is tell people how they can survive, how they can thrive in relationship with God. Stop giving them all the things that they can't do. Those are things that come about in relationship. When you're in relationship with God, you realize, when I do this, I am not in a good headspace. So maybe I should stop. When I do this, I am not. And there's a way to teach people about God that I think people are missing. And, there are moments where I get asked to speak in church, and I'm always like, and religion has taught you this, and religion has taught you that. And I always see what the audience, what the people in the church are going to say. What are you going to say? Are you going to look at me weird? Are you going to say that I'm wrong? And I didn't realize that when I was saying those things and how I was talking about the people in the Bible, especially the women in the Bible, I had no idea that a lot of the views that I had was rooted in womanism. And so womanism really talks about the Black female experience in the church. And I'm like just now starting to tap into those things. And somebody sent me some literature on it. And as I'm like reading and trying to figure out, oh, okay, like now I'm starting to understand. And it really just goes against how some things in the Bible have been rooted in patriarchy. So, and the people that are actually upholding these views and these like extreme things have been men. We don't really see a lot of women in the church. We don't. We have a few now that are coming up here and there, but we don't see a lot of women in the church. And why? And the way that some things are taught, like how Ruth and the story of Ruth was taught. We were taught that Ruth, was in a field, and she got the attention of a man. Boaz was really, really old and died shortly after Ruth got married. And so what you'll hear men talk to single, mostly Black women about the Ruth story is that you need to get a Boaz. Like, what? No. Yes, you can get into I do believe that love and romanticism and things like that are possible, but we have to stop teaching women that is the only prize. The prize was she listened to God and she followed her mother-in-law to a place she had never been to, that she trusted God in that space. That is the lesson there, not that she got Boaz. And the lesson, even with Boaz, is that she was in the lineage of God. She ended up being in the lineage of Jesus.
Yeah.
But they talk about Sarah, and they say, oh, Sarah was praying and calling out, and then they talked about how Hagar got pregnant with Abraham's baby. And they tried to say in the Bible that Hagar was a woman that was flaunting her pregnancy. Now, if we really think about this, because we know the origins of slavery, right? If Hagar was a handmaid and she was asked to have sex with Abraham, essentially, if we really think about it, she was raped. What raped slave would flaunt a baby in front of the wife of the master? Nobody. So was she taunted? And why does her story seem like Hagar was in the wrong and Sarah wasn't? Sarah was in the wrong completely. And
well, wasn't it Sarah was the one that told him, God, because in that story, God had already promised her that they were going to have a child, and Sarah
for her.
Yes, for her to have a child, but because she didn't trust what God had said, she had told him to go and sleep with Hagar. Mm-hmm. And that's how that all started. It was because she walked out of line with what God had called, what had told them was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no, so, yeah. Yes.
There's a lot of stories in the Bible about women that were taught to us by, men or people that necessarily did not go to seminary or did not understand. And I am starting to realize when I'm doing research, as I prepare to speak sometimes, or I'm doing my own research, that some of the ways we've been taught about some women in the Bible have been wrong. And it's given, I think, women a different view of how they're supposed to operate in their life. Because why are the single ministries always led by men? Why does the church always tell women what they need to do in order to get a husband and not the other way around? That's an issue.
No, I
There's
agree.
a problem. And like people are like really taking those words. They believe so much in what their pastor is saying that they are not going to the Bible for themselves and realizing like, wait, that's actually not that's actually not right. And so what I'm starting to do is like really do a lot of research and try to see like, okay, what are some things that I was taught that I need to unlearn in order for me to get into a better relationship with God and to be able to walk in do this Christian walk in the way that he intends me to do.
So I'll tell you this, like as we're like talking, I think the biggest calling from what you're saying is we need to our relationship with Christ, our personal relationship with Christ is number one.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are connected to the source,
Yeah.
then you can go to the source. Also, reading your Bible is very important. And that's a thing that I know can be hard for
Mm-hmm.
Christians. I think it's the same way as like when you need to work out, but you're just like avoiding it.
Yeah.
But as a Christian, if that's what you decided to be in your life as a Christian, it is imperative that you read your Bible. It's
Mm-hmm.
imperative that you get in your word, because if not, you will be led astray by people because you're just going off of their knowledge. And also
Mm-hmm.
like your own personal walk will be weak. Like you
Yeah.
being able to survive and go through this world will be weak by not having that personal connection on your own. And definitely during this time where we're not in a church, we're not like able to go there to feed us as we're used to, or be in those groups as much, or in the same way, you're having to rely a lot on like what did you have before this started?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you in God?
Yeah.
But I'll say this though. I think my biggest caution, and it's not even a caution, it's just something I've noticed, is like I've had friends who, in a way to noticing that like some people have maybe been teaching them wrong, or they don't, whatever, they will just disconnect from community.
Yep.
And so there's people who are, because here's the thing, there are wrong interpretations,
Yes.
period.
Yeah.
um
Because we don't live in the same time that the Bible was created, right?
no,
So
no,
there
we
are some
don't.
translations there that are just not gonna be the same.
You need context, but
Mm-hmm.
you do need leadership.
Yeah.
Like you, just because you're in a church, and this is my point of view, just if you're in a church and it's not speaking to you, if it's not feeding you, if they're not, then go to a different church.
Mm-hmm.
But keep going until you find a church, you find a community.
Mm-hmm.
Which even then could be dangerous, because you have a certain point of view, then you'll just find like a church that that has that point of view, even if the point of view is wrong. Like
Yeah.
I'm being real. Like I see people who are like Christians, I'm like, yo, that's not Jesus. Because think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone probably went to Paula White's church or Kenneth Copeland's church, and they said that speaks to what I believe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And so, and you know what? The only deterrent from getting caught up in things that are cultish, getting caught up in things that are not of God, is really, really, one, you do need community. You really do need community. But you have to find a community. And it's so scary. We're just in such a place where so many people are not walking out this walk with Christ in a healthy way, or in a right way, where you go to a community that is Bible based, but you can find a Bible based community that's using it and is manipulating people with it.
Oh yeah. And I think that's where the relationship has to come in, right? To
Yeah.
to know God well enough and to be able to discern well enough to know what fits for you. I am in the point of my relationship with God where I can discern things. Not supposed to be here. Nope, not supposed to take that job. Nope, not supposed to be in that relationship. Nope, that friendship needs to stop. Wait, I need to wait. That's where I am now. And I realize that everybody has to grow to that point, right? And I think when you really have to understand, am I convicted or is my spirit not happy here? Because some people can be convicted and say, I don't want to come back here no more. And they can be convicted. And the thing about conviction, being convicted in a church or feeling guilt and shame, nobody is supposed to be making you feel guilty and shameful
That's
about
not
anything.
God.
God doesn't even make us feel guilty and shame. That is our own our humanity coming out when we feel guilt and shame. Nobody is supposed to be doing that. So I think that is the main thing. If you are constantly feeling guilty and ashamed, or you feel that you are guilted and ashamed in church, or you're being shamed about some of the things you're doing, you don't need to be there.
But isn't guilt, but here's how it gets tricky, because can't someone say they're feeling guilty or they're feeling shamed be emotional reaction to what may actually just be truth or conviction?
And that is the thin line, I think, because that's what I'm saying. You could be in a church and they be saying something, you be like, dang, I really need to stop doing that. Like they are right. Like, I really need to stop doing that. And I think you have to be self-aware enough to know the difference in what you feel when you hear certain things.
But I don't think people are. I just don't. I don't personally. I don't know if I can trust. Because I do believe our flesh is very persuasive.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very clear with what we were just talking about.
I just want so like, for instance, like from like your walk with Christ, what do you think led you to this place, right? Because at one point you were that person who was that baby Christian.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
So it's like how for you did you get from a place of that where you would say is more vulnerable to the place now where you're able to know what to be locked into, the truth of God, like without letting your flesh be the thing that deters, or your own personal opinions or feelings? Because I know people who are I feel like the church I'm in right now is a very strong church, but I know people I go to church with who make choices not off of Christ but off of their personal emotions and their feelings still. So it's just so, but then at the same point where, okay, I'm sorry, it's just so it's a complicated thing. But yeah, I want to hear for you, like, how do you feel you got to that place?
I don't think we ever fully get there. I think you just grow, you just continue to grow, you get better at it. So for me, I grew up in the church. I have been in the church since I was a child. And then around middle school, my dad became a pastor. And so he started pastoring different congregations and stuff like that. And so while my introduction to Christ was through the church that I grew up in, and then my parents, what had to happen when I got to college was I had to start learning God for myself. And so I started learning God for myself. I started reading the word on my own. And there were several moments in my life that I took the time, I separated myself and took the time to really get to know God. I took the time to heal. I took the time to do the inner work. And in all of those things that I did, I found him in every space. And so I became very familiar with his voice. I became very familiar with how I feel when I'm in his presence. And I became to get very in tune with both myself and with God. Are there still things that I'm learning? Yes. But I think that takes time to get there. I realized that not everybody was first. Because I grew up in the church, I heard all those Bible stories when I was 5 through 18. So a lot of the Bible stories that I heard about Ruth, I heard about Joseph, I heard about David, I heard about all these things. I watched the movies, I read the books and stuff like that. They didn't hit me until I became an adult. Wait, so Joseph, a lot of the things that they experienced in the Bible can be parallel to my own life. How did they get through that? What did God do for them in that season? How did God show up for them in that season? And I'm starting to understand and realize through that. And so I guess to answer your question, it took me a long time to get here, but it's because I started to really question the things that I was learning. When I would hear opposing thought, I would be like, where did that come from? I would always talk to people. Like a lot of Christians get mad when they talk to atheists. I don't. If an atheist is ever in my space and they want to talk about stuff, I ask them, oh, so why are you atheist? Like, what made you get away from that? And like I said, it's either hypocrisy from people or trauma. And they don't understand that type of lifestyle. They don't understand that bad things really do happen to good people. And there isn't like a huge reason behind it. It's just that is life. That in society tries to tell you good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. That is not true. They will always go over, and that is life, and that is how you have to understand and know that. And the way to get through those bad things is to be able to walk through them with somebody that can handle them, with somebody that can actually carry the burden that you're carrying. And so for me, I've had conversations with people that have left the church, that have said, I don't want to, if this is the way that Christianity is, I don't want to do that. I've had people that will say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I even went through a season in my life where, and I don't even consider myself religious now. When people ask me, am I Christian? I'm like, yeah, I love God. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, I'm a Christian. That is who I align with. But I care more about my relationship with God than religion in itself. Religion in itself has probably done more damage when taught in a way for personal interest or people's interpretation for, while relationship has saved lives and have impacted people in a way that they have been able to truly walk in their Christian walk confidently. And so I think for me, it just took me a while to start looking and starting to question and understand that there are some things that I learned that weren't completely right, or there were some things that I learned that I need to research and look up for myself. So I was always the type of person, I'll go to Google real quick. I'll go to the origin of things. What does this word mean in Hebrew? Why did that? When I learned about the Garden of Gethsemane, and people gloss across that, Jesus just had a moment where he questioned and he asked God for his will to be done. No, Jesus was experiencing anxiety and depression because he knew that he was about to go on the cross. The Garden of Gethsemane means the pressing of the oil. Mm-hmm. In order to get oil out of a seed, it has to be hot pressure. When you're going through things, there will be moments where you're like, God, if you really want me to do this, I'll do this. If it's not your will, let me know. But if it is yours, let it be done. People are not teaching it in that way. People are not teaching it in that way. And so when Christians are feeling anxious or depressed or sad or anything like that, one of the biggest things I worked on in therapy was my view of God, my view of Christianity. That was one of the biggest things we worked on, because I would say certain things and my therapist was Christian and she would be like, wait, why do you think that? Wait, why I want to push in and like see what you mean by that. And so I think it took me therapy, learning myself, unlearning a whole lot of things, not being mad about the way that I was taught, because guess what? People teach you the way that they've been taught, or the people or the way that they perceive to be able to receive the word. And that's the thing about writing in the Bible. There is an interpretation that you can have. And that's why research is very important. And so I think it took me a lot of unlearning to really get to the point that I'm in now. But I truly have a lot of empathy for people that have experienced church hurt, for people that don't necessarily understand the things of God. Yeah, I have a lot of empathy for them because I understand that it's a process. And that in order for me to bring them to Christ, or in order for me to show them the way, I have to be empathetic to that process and not assume that I know everything just because I'm a Christian.
That's good. That's really one thing that you said that really stood out, because I feel like kind of the way that I've been, even like in my communication with you about like these things that we know is true, what it takes to be successful in this walk, I feel like so much of like, and how I've been like responding is like my dependence on like human beings to carry themselves to this place where they're hearing God clearly, or being in a place that's actually rested on truth. But when I look at like my own walk, it was, I made a choice in college. It was like the end of college, and I was just, I was a Christian because like, I think, it's just kind of, sometimes it's just what you do, right? You went to church, like, but you don't really have your own
relationship. Especially in African-American households.
Oh yeah. I honestly,
we go to church.
Yeah. I honestly relate it a lot to, I think about my Jewish friends, like who were just Jewish, but like they didn't do anything so on holidays. And I was like, I don't know. It's kind of that. It's like it's a tradition. And so I felt like I traditionally was in it until I was like 20, like probably 23, I had to be like 22, 23, 24, one of the ages. And I just was like, I'm very unhappy in my life. And, we always talk about how there's peace, there's joy, and there's all these things in Christ. And I was like, look, I'm not experiencing any of that. And I made a choice. I was like, either I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do this. So I'm going to go full in and see what it's about, and see
Yeah.
if this is the choice that I want to make for my life. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I decided to do that, that is when my life started to change. When I made the choice to dig into what does it mean to be a Christian, or what does it mean to follow Christ, that is when God opened up doors for me. And when I say open up doors, not like financially, but he put me in environments that nurtured me and that took me through. The first church that I committed to,
Mm-hmm.
I had never, growing up, like we went to church, but I had never gone to church every Sunday until my roommate, who grew up in a household where you go to church every Sunday. And so we
Girl,
would,
you're lucky, girl, because I was tired. By the time I was 18, I was like, I'm not going.
I didn't do that, but my friend did that. And so we went to the same church, and, you know, she had a car, I didn't, and we would ride together. And I'd be like, I'll go to church if she goes to church. She went to church every Sunday. So every Sunday, like literally, I'd be laying in the bed and I'd be like, we need to leave in 5 minutes. And she hadn't said anything. And I would hear her door, do, 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 do. And she would quit, get ready in 5 minutes. And I was like, okay. And so, but like, I believe that God works in these things, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I happened to be with a roommate that went to church every Sunday. So that forced me to go to be present in that space like I had never been in my whole life. The church environment I was in, I dance. I like to dance, and I danced in high school, and I wanted to join the dance team. But the only way you can join the dance team is if you join church. So I had to join the church to be on the dance team. And I remember the first day I was in the dance team, the girl was like, you know what? This is about us dancing, but really, like, I want to hear like your life story and like how God is like working on you. Sorry, it makes me want to cry. Just because it's like, so sitting in that environment, when she asked that question, it opened me up in a way that I had never, like, I grew up in like an abusive environment, just verbal abuse, like emotional abuse. And so her just saying that, I mean, being there, wanting to just join the dance team so I could dance at the church, opened up my heart in a way that I never knew I needed. But it's like God knew I needed these things. And so, like, when it comes to like the walk, and like I just think of all my friends who've like fallen away or believe in things that are really weird. I honestly cannot speak to what it's like in their relationship, but I just believe like God is like a pursuer, and I believe God is good. And if you genuinely like seek him out and seek out being like, you know, along the way, like, yeah, I've been in a community and been like, okay, this ain't gonna work no more. It had to move on.
You can outgrow seasons.
But there was always an open door or people around that he allowed to be in my space to help guide me along the way, you know? And so I think ultimately, like, I think sometimes my like feedback is coming from a place of looking at other people I know and seeing like their walks and being like, how did that happen? Like, if you seeking God, like you telling me like this, we shouldn't be here. but ultimately, like, I don't know what's happening in it, but I know like, I can only speak about my thing. And when I seeked Christ, when I, you know, was open always to his truth and who he was, and not what I wanted, what I felt, what was my like flesh, there's always been someone there, whether I knew it or not, or a thing or not, that guided me along the way. Yeah. So ultimately, like, putting the weight on people, like these steps are things that we say, yes, you should do. But ultimately, when you are focused in on who Christ is, what does the word say? Like, all things will fall. If you, seek thee first and everything else will, I'm saying it wrong, but like basically seek him first and everything else will fall in line. Yeah. I remember my cousin, she was like, someone asked me something, and like, I was talking to my cousin, we were talking about sex, and she's like, well, you know, like, you know, what if I get challenged? And I said, honestly, like, I was like, just seek God, seek God, and everything else will fall in line. Because the reality, and in my mind, I was thinking, because the reality of life is, you know, things happen sometimes.
Yeah, you are going to get caught up.
You're gonna get challenged. You know, hopefully, you know, you always keep it tight. But not everyone does. Not everyone does, and because not everyone does. Yeah. When that happens, if you're so busy just focusing on keeping it tight, or you're like white knuckling basically through your Christianity, you will fall away. But if you focus in on,
don't drink, don't smoke, don't have sex, don't do all these things, instead of saying those things, there should be a deeper conversation on what they mean by them. Okay, this is the reason why God doesn't want you to do this. This is the reason why God doesn't want you to do that. If they were to teach young people that way, with like a transparent, a vulnerable conversation about those things, I won't sit here and tell you that you won't be tempted, because you will, and you're human. I won't even sit here and tell you that you won't even give into that temptation. But I will tell you that God will be there every single time.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
The closer that you get to God, the more you'll say, now I know why he doesn't want me to do those. Now I get there is a reason behind this. When I get caught up in that, my emotions are jacked up, and it's usually with someone that I'm not going to be with forever. And that is why he wants me to. And so if we taught young people that, then they would grow up and truly understand. But also with the whole sex conversation, when it comes to fornication and doing things like that, I think there is a way that we should be talking about it in the church that I don't think a lot of people are doing. For being honest, most of the people that were in the Bible that ended up getting married, they got married very young, 14, 15, 16. Of course, they were able to stay pure. Of course, they were able to do those things. We're talking about women that are 20, 30, 40. We're talking about men that are 20, 30, 40. The older you get, the harder it is. And so that there begs the question of, I know that I'm going to fall, but was the way that I was taught about sex in the church, was that correct? Was that correct? Did they scare me from sex? Did they tell me what was going to come from it? Did they talk about soul ties in there? What exactly was that? And I think that is something that, I don't know if you've ever heard of this woman named Candace Bimbo. She went to theology school, and she has this, I don't know if it's a book or a manuscript, but it's like called Red Lip Theology. And she talks about sex, but this is something that I have been thinking about since I was a child. Why are there purity classes, and what are we teaching in those purity classes? What are we telling young women that we don't tell men? What are we saying in those type of spaces? And when people do fall, do we give them the tools to be able to go to God? Do we tell them that, like, okay, now you messed up, let's talk about that. Let's go in and talk about that. God is not mad at you because you did that. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. Okay, we know that. Now, how do we move forward? Because I think what ends up happening is somebody could go to church and they could hear a pastor say, because you're not supposed to be having sex, and they just got out of somebody's bed. Will they come back to that church? They might not. That very thing could make them say, well, I guess I'm not meant to be in that type of community. I guess I'm not meant to be a Christian because I keep messing up and I keep failing. And it's really hard for me to stop drinking because I'm depressed. And I don't know, no one has ever taught me how to keep myself and to not go into these sexual relationships with others. How do you do that? And so I think what I want the church to do a better job of is really being able to speak to every type of person that could walk in the church. Because if you tell people to come as they are, but you dictate and you tell them what they should not be doing, how is that love?
So I have to agree and disagree with you. I basically agree with everything. But I think I disagree with, I think we should know what we should and shouldn't be doing. But I think ultimately, like, it's how we're doing it. Like, are we doing it from a place of love, or are we doing it from a place of change this and then you're enough? Or
I agree.
You see what I'm saying? Because I don't want to. I feel like sometimes people, and I don't think this is what you're saying. I'm just obviously going from my interpretation, right, of like hearing what you're saying, but not obviously being in you and knowing, hey, this is all of the full picture, right? I have seen people sometimes step away from telling the truth in order to not hurt feelings. But I think some people do not speak in love.
They
Don't
don't.
speak in love. And also, like, what all of this, again, this is all the biggest, because I've been in therapy for 9 years. You know, best thing that ever happened to me. Best thing ever happened to me, changed my life. I'm not ashamed of it. It's a continual thing. But what that opened up for me was how much, like, the things that I was outwardly doing, and I was being like, I know that's wrong. I know this is wrong. But what those things were speaking to actually a deeper thing within me.
Oh yeah.
And we don't, when we're not, and this is what it is, like, when we're not focused on giving God our heart and letting him work in here, these outward things go crazy, because because all these outward things is a product of what's happening inwardly, right? So if you let God into your heart, into your mind, when he changes that, when he changes this, when he heals whatever it is inside of you, these things will fall off. They just naturally fall off. And I think so many times we're not like, my whole thing is, like, I do think we should obviously talk about purity. I think we should talk about the things that we shouldn't do, but I think we do not talk about enough our personal relationship with Christ. You being connected to him as the source, because when you are connected to him, all these things fall in place. Like, for instance, I've pledged my virginity probably about 4 times. Probably Christian camp, you go to a thing, you go this. I remember, like, the 4th time I was like, I'm not doing this no more. I've done this. Y'all, I have pledged it so many times. Like, I'm just like, I'm not doing it no more. I'm not signing nothing else saying that I ain't gonna do it. I already told y'all. Okay? I'm not doing it no more.
Yeah.
But I had, at that time when I was doing all that, I didn't have a personal relationship with Christ. So when I was trying to hold on to my virginity, I was playing the game of, well, how far can I go? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I do this? Because I had not yet actually saw value in what that meant.
Exactly. And
I didn't see value in it because I didn't have because really staying pure is in the same vein as dealing with your pride, dealing with lying. It's all rooted in the same thing, which is in, like, walking out. Basically, I believe that we are supposed to be examples of Christ, and all of these things play factors in what it looks like to resemble who Christ is and how he wants us to operate in this world. And because I wasn't in a place where I was trying to operate as an example of Christ, and I was just doing the Christianity thing because that was the thing you did. Holding on to my virginity, I was just doing it because I was told to do it, but not because I saw a deeper meaning in it.
And that is what I'm saying. They don't give people deeper meanings. It is okay to say what you are supposed to be doing. But if you never give people the deeper understanding or the meaning of that, then they're just doing it to do it. And what ends up happening, and I talk about as a Black woman because that's what I am. What ends up happening, and this is in my friend group and even in myself, we did everything that we were supposed to do. Oh, don't have sex? Cool. Okay, won't do that. Okay, read my word, do all these things. Check. Well, you told me to do all these things, and in some ways, you were telling me to do these things because you told me that I would be able to find a husband. Well, where is he? So what I'm saying is this purity culture has been taught to women. When I did a purity class, I did it in it wasn't the church that I was a part of, but I did it in another church, and it was for college students, and it was both men and women. And so sometimes we would have sessions together, sometimes we would have sessions separate. That the way that they taught us, I was like, okay, now I see what this is about. Now I understand. Now I know this. But from what I was taught growing up in the church was that it was just bad, and that is what it is, and no. And so what ended up happening is my father had to tell me, sex is not bad. I would rather you wait. God would love for you to wait, but make sure you love, like, the way that he taught me really, really played through in my life. And so I had these 2 different views. So my dad was saying this, the church was being very extreme. Don't do it. Do not do it. Don't do it. You don't need to do it. Then I get to college and I'm in this purity class, and they're saying the implications of sex and how it ties up with your emotions. How every time you are entering somebody's body, you are entering everybody that they did it with and before. And I was able to really see and understand that. But what I'm seeing now is there are many women, late 20s going into early 30s, that followed all of those rules, thinking that there was something on the other side of that. Some of them thought husband, some of them thought a marriage or something like that, that didn't get that. And so that is the scary part of telling people to do something without giving them the deeper understanding.
Well, also,
and telling them to follow all these rules that they're those rules really just have something to do with like you being closer to Christ. They really, there are no check, and then you get here. That is not relationship with God. That's religion. And I think that is the problem. I think there's a lot of people that are mad about that.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, you fine.
I'm sorry. I kept Jan. I was like, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
I didn't mean to, but it just, from what you were saying, what's and it's true, right? It's like the checklist. It's like teaching us to follow rules, or if you check these things, you will get this thing.
And what is the thing? Do we even know what the thing is sometimes?
Well, I mean, you were saying like people were like, you check this thing and you get a husband, or you check this thing and you get this. And then, you know what? That also speaks to just our view of God and our view of what it looks like to be a Christian. Like
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately what it's like to be a Christian is like you are giving over your life completely to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it's about. It's not about you checking so that you get this, you know. It's never about that. And it doesn't mean you're not going to get those things.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I believe, you know, I believe that, okay, so I'm in this Bible study and they talk about the scripture where it talks about the desires of your heart.
Uh-huh.
And I think what we miss with that is that, yeah, but I think what we miss with that is that some people think ultimately we are supposed to give our heart to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So if we give our heart over to him, the scripture's deeper than this. My class, it can go deeper than this, but ultimately, and I've been thinking, ultimately your heart belongs to Christ. And so he is the one that determines the desires of your heart. So when you are with him and you are opening your heart, your soul, and everything to him and what he wants for you, those desires will happen. But if you're not giving your heart, if you're not opening yourself to maybe what God has for your life, then your desires may not line up with actually what is for you.
Yes.
That's a really clunky short way. It's way more beautiful, and if you study it and
I know what you mean.
You know,
yeah.
It's
and
way more beautiful. But
I think it's one of those religious colloquialisms that people say. God will give you the desires of your heart. They don't give us context with that, right? God gives you the desires of your heart according to his will.
Yeah.
So every desire in your heart might not be according to his will. That desire might not happen. Are you okay with that? It is a surrendering.
Yeah. And the thing is, you know, I don't believe God is playing with people. And I think I don't believe God is not playing with us. And so I know there's that fear. It's like, I have this desire and God's not going to give it to me. I think what I will tell you is I think you need to submit that to him and have trust that he knows more than you and that he sees you better than you'll ever see yourself. And so if he does, then you got to submit it to him and trust that whatever this is that you're feeling, whatever you're desiring, he will fulfill that in the purpose and way that he has called for it to be fulfilled.
Exactly.
So I don't think he's playing with us, you know?
Yeah. And some people will say, you know, there have been moments where I'm like, come on, God, like, what's happening? Like, what's going on? I've definitely had moments where
every day.
What you over there doing, man? But like every single time I have surrendered, every time I said, I am okay with whatever happens, you know what I want. I don't have to keep telling you that. You know my heart. And sometimes, you know what? While I say that, I don't have to keep telling you, sometimes it is good to say out loud exactly what you want. God, I really desire this in my life. I desire it because of this. And I really want this to happen because of this. I think getting very clear on it, on what it is that you want, and giving those desires and saying, if it is not your will, don't let it happen. Close close the doors that are meant to be closed and open the ones that no man can shut.
That's good.
And those are ways that I think we have to go to God and we have to pray, because what ends up happening is we'll use things like God gives you the desires of your heart, or delay is not denial. We use those little short little things and God will never give you more than you can bear. We use those little things sometimes when we're talking to people or we're giving advice to people, and it does not give them context as to how they're supposed to be able to get through life or get through that moment knowing those things, right? Like if somebody is depressed and you tell them delay is not denial, well, I feel denied. So what am I going to do? If somebody is going through a super, super tough season, and you tell them God will not give you more than you can bear, what they're feeling is that they can't bear it. What you need to tell them is that they are not supposed to bear it alone. And so what ends up happening sometimes, I think, when people in religion say those little colloquialisms, I used to say them all the time. And as I got older and I started growing in Christ and growing in my relationship with God, I was like, some of the stuff people say are not right, or they do not give enough context for people to be like, oh, okay, that worked. Okay, now I understand. And it wasn't something I realized until I started experiencing depression and anxiety on my own. And people would say that because that's what you're supposed to say, right? Those are things that you're supposed to say to people when they're going through. But it took me having to experience those things and those words not being comforting to me, realizing there is context and other things we have to say in order for that to work, in order for people to feel better about that thing. And so I think when it comes to the desires of the heart, that's like a huge one. When you brought it up, I like immediately smiled, because that's something that everybody says. God give you the desires of your heart. And you're like, well, why does it work out for well, because that is at the top of my heart and it didn't work out. So
Yeah.
what does that mean? And so I think what the people of God have to do a better job of, even past pastors and people and leaders in Christ, if people are around you and they are looking to you for that light and you're trying to guide them to God, I think one of the biggest things you have to make sure you do is to give context when you're saying things. You know, like every time a young person says something like what I just, some of the religious colloquialisms that I just said, and I say, actually, if you really think about that, how about we say this? How about we say that? Because some of the things that I think people just naturally say because we've heard it in church for most of our lives does not necessarily help people get through something if you do not give them context. Context is so important. If you're telling people don't have sex, what context are you giving them? If you're telling them not supposed to be drinking, not supposed to be smoking, what context are you giving them? If you're telling people that God gives them the desires of your heart, what context are you giving them? If you give no context, then I don't think we're helping. I don't think it's helpful. And I think that's like the biggest part about community is you will get context in community. Somebody in your community should be connected to the word so much that they know that context.
I think, you were talking earlier about how like you're really comfortable talking to people who are like atheists and all this. And I used to have so much anxiety. Like I'm not the person who's gonna come up to you and be like, "Do you know Jesus?" I'm not gonna do that. That's just not
never been me.
I'm not gonna invite you, me having this conversation. But there's some people that like they can, right? And I think the reason why I always felt so uncomfortable with that is that I felt this need to have the answers. I felt this need to, if you tell me something, for me to have the rebuttal, if you say something, for me to have the answers. And I think sometimes we just have to get comfortable in the fact that like, you're not always going to have the answers, right? And if you don't know, you go, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I know I can ask.
Exactly.
We can ask. Or like, we don't always have, sometimes like, I think I just realized this in like myself. It's like, it's not always necessary for me to have the answers. It's like, sometimes I just need to listen. I just need to hear someone,
Yeah.
And it's okay to be like, I don't know. I don't understand, but that's something like either I need to look into, or it's like, that's something like you should ask God about, because I don't know. And that's okay.
Yeah. You should ask God or what I've been doing is telling people like, maybe therapy could really help. Cause that's what helped me with a lot of the unanswered questions that I had was my own research, asking God, and then going to therapy. And that's what I've been doing, because I saw a post on social media was talking about toxic positivity versus what you're supposed to say to someone. And there was like this one side of like, you weren't really listening right here, and you just kind of, and so one side was just talking about, oh, everything happens for a reason, and da da da, and like, there have been moments in my past, like especially in college, when someone would be telling me what they were going through, and I'd be like, Romans 8:28, all things work together for those who love God. But if I give no context to that, if I don't tell them, if I don't guide them to another resource, if I don't say, does that really help? And so I'm really starting to understand that, yes, you don't have an answer for everything, but two, guiding people to first the source and the resources that they could be able to really get through what they need to get through, because we don't always have the answers, and I think it's okay to say that and to know that. And while I've never been a person like you, I've never been a person that say, hey, you want to get to know Christ? Never, ever, ever have I ever done that. But what I have done, without even directly thinking that I've been doing, is when people would come to me, I would either bring up God or how I was able to get through a situation and say, this may not be what you do, but this is how I did it. Or I would always credit God for the things that he was doing in my life, and people started to notice and understand, oh wait, she talks about God when these things happen, or she talks about God when she needs to whenever she has had a moment in her life where she needed to get through, or she was experiencing something traumatic, or she credited God when she was able to get that opportunity. When you do things like that in your circle, you won't even have to personally tell them, hey, here's about God. If you live your life in that way, people understand that and they know that. Right. Like, I had so many of my friends in college, like I said, I wasn't trying to directly do this. Jasmine, you really got me closer to God. How? Like, that wasn't something that I wouldn't even call myself a necessary witness. But when you live your life with the light of God in you, I think it comes out. You don't necessarily have to. The people that are atheists, they are drawn to a light. Okay, so I heard you say that you go to therapy. I heard you say that you go to church. Why is that? And I tell them, okay, well, I don't believe in God because of this. A lot of people don't believe in God because of that. Okay, so this is why I do, and this is why I continue to go. And we always leave the conversation with, just try them. Just try them for yourself. Just try them. Forget about all the stuff you learned, all the things that were damaging to your perception of God, your perception of church. Try him. And I think you would do a great job if you read this book. If you read The Shack. The Shack makes God, it personifies God in a way that I've never seen. Read The Shack. Watch the movie. Or read this, read that. Like, always trying to make sure that I give them a type of resource. But I remember when there was a time where I would be nervous if somebody was to come up to me and they said that they were an atheist, like, especially in college. Like, I would have been like, yeah, I don't get it. And I wouldn't even been able to sit and hear an opposing view without being like, no, that's wrong. But now as an adult, oh yeah. We can talk about it.
I'm still learning how to, like, and it's not just like people who don't believe what I believe. It's like opposing views from people that say they believe what I believe, like, not being like, but I think ultimately, like, what you spoke to is like, I feel like making a space for people is the best thing that we can, being Jesus to people is the best thing that we can do. You don't need to say, like, you don't need to press Christ or press God onto people. The way you walk your life will speak that. Ultimately. Yeah. And that takes, to me, that takes all the pressure off, and it allows me to just be around different people and be like, okay. And then, I'll say my point of view if they want to hear it. Sometimes, like, people don't want to hear it. I don't say it's okay. Like, you ain't always got to say your point of view. You know what I mean? You ain't always got to, like, you ain't always got to be like, but God don't like that. Like, you don't. And sometimes, like, your friends already know. Like, you don't.
You ain't got to say none of that.
I had to learn that the hard way. I had a friendship breakup, and, like, the friend.
Those hurt.
Oh my God. The friend knew what I believed, and I thought in order to bring her back to Christ or do this, that I always needed to say my, like, 2 cents. My heart was thinking I was, like, bringing her back, but really, where she was in life, it's just pushing her away. And I remember I remember I was praying about something, and God was just like I just felt such a freedom that like I could just be loving to people. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to judge. I don't need to correct. I can just be loving to people and let God do that work. But
Yeah.
like by being him, being following his example, there's no need for me to be like, I'm gonna just give you some words, some scripture, and it's like like it's not loving, or it's just like, okay, girl, like the best way you could ever preach Christ, like even with like the IBW, like I don't talk about Christ a lot on it. You know, I have people
Mm-hmm.
that if they are, that's what they talk about. If they're not, like cool, but it's
Mm-hmm.
I want to create a space for everyone, and like I think ultimately like my heart is just to create the loving space that Christ would create for people.
Oh yeah,
You
definitely.
know, and
Mm-hmm.
there's so much I want to hit on. One, I think, you know, when people, if you look at the life of Christ's life wasn't just like he got everything he wanted. He died in one of the most savage and terrible ways.
Yeah.
He didn't deserve any of that.
Uh-uh.
I was in the shower today and I was thinking about that, and I was wondering, yes, Christ needed to be a sacrifice, but I was wondering, why is it that that was the way that Christ died?
Mm-hmm.
Being tortured, being like I can't, ridiculed, is that the word?
Ridicule.
Ridiculed.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm trying to read more. Like, but like, it's like, why did God have to die in such a way? Was
Yeah.
people doing that to him, you know? And even, you know, one of the things he says is, Lord, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And it's like, you can look at the life of Christ. Like there are things that he went through that were awful. And I think it does speak to all things, that all things work according to those who are called to his purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that was such terrible and awful way for him to die. And
Mm-hmm.
it ultimately worked for the greatest good that this world will ever know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think you can't, you know, and I think it's wrong for people to put out this image of, if you're a Christian, everything's going to go well. And the Bible does not speak to that. Jesus' life did not speak to that. That is false.
Man, I think that's the narrative that probably bothers me the most. And what I realize about that narrative is there are moments where pastor, now mind you, we would be in church all day if they went through every single thing, right? There's a way that they have to preach in order to get the message across. But what I feel like has been a failure is they talk about what happened. Say, for instance, Joseph. They talk about the dream that Joseph had. They talk about the pit. And then sometimes they go straight to the palace. They may talk about the intricacies in the middle, but I believe, especially for us, for millennials, I believe that it's important that when we learn about the people in the Bible and things like that, it's very important to read for yourself. But if you're learning about those things and you are a pastor or you're a church leader and you're explaining these things or you're leading Bible study, it is so important to talk about that middle in everybody's story. In Job's story, we need to talk about the middle, because in the middle he was questioning God, and God put him on. He put God on the stand, and his friends were telling him all kinds of things. We need to talk about the middle. In Ruth's story, we need to talk about the middle. In Joseph's story, we need to talk about the middle. If we miss the middle, then there are going to be young people, not even young people, anybody that are going to say, okay, I'm a Christian. This is what I'm doing. And they're going to experience something. And because they do not know the intricacies of what can happen to you in the middle, all they know is, I thought that I was supposed to be, is this purpose? Like, what am I going through? Why am I experiencing this? I think there needs to be more emphasis on the middle and not just the victory. If we just talk about the beginning of someone's story and we just talk about the end, that middle is so important. And I think a lot of people are going through their middle now. The pandemic has been hard for everybody. Some people have experienced more things than other people, but for the most part, everybody has had some type of struggle in this pandemic. And if we hear these stories of, okay, Joseph had a dream, eventually he got to the palace. Okay, but you didn't know that Joseph was in prison. And you didn't know that Joseph was also in that pit. and they sold him. Then he went to prison. Then he was working for somebody else. And then they said that he raped the girl. And so he ended up going to prison. And in the prison, he met the person that would eventually allow him to be on the stand. And so if you understand that most of the most famous people in the Bible, when we really think about that, they all had a pretty rocky story. And that middle is so important. And I think if we're able to talk about the middle in a way that people can understand, and they will understand this walk, that way this is not an easy walk. That there are going to be moments that this walk in me staying on this course will sometime go against human thought. You know, a lot of really, really, really intelligent and smart people have a hard time with religion, and they really have a hard time with Christianity, because there are moments where it goes against everything that you've learned, right? It goes against all the things that you've learned. Good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. It goes against all of that knowledge, all the things that you've been able to learn. There are things that happen in the supernatural that you won't be able to explain naturally. So if it's going against thought, and we don't tell people about those middle journeys, I think we lose people in that. And that is why when people have the doctrine of, oh yeah, that once you become a Christian, everything is fine. No. I would even say that the moment, because even in my life, the moment that I surrendered and told God that whatever you want me to do, I'll do. I want to walk in your purpose. I want to do that. My life got a little more difficult, because the enemy knew what could happen on the other side of that. The enemy tried me more. The enemy tried me way more. And so we got to start telling people the truth about this walk. It's not easy. There will be moments where you won't understand. Look at the people in the Bible. See what they did. How did they pray? How did they stay? How did they stay connected? And there are moments where I think the Bible purposely does not tell us what people said in those times. We don't know if Joseph was depressed or sad or mad about all the things that he was going through. All we knew is that he continued to trust God. You can be trusting of God and also be going through a season.
I mean, you could look at Psalms, right? Look at the Psalms and David, and like hearing his heart where he was in certain places, his anger, all of those things. And you know what this speaks to? Because here's the ultimate win, right? Like, not everything is going to be sugar coated candy, but ultimately what God promises is the Spirit, is the fruits of the Spirit, is joy, is the like all. I don't want to mess it up and embarrass myself. Joy.
No, it's a lot of them. I think it's like 9, right?
Long suffering, love. I'm messing up now.
Long suffering?
Yeah.
That tells you that you're going to suffer.
Yeah.
That tells you that you'll suffer.
But the thing is, the Bible never, and I believe it's intentional. Like, God shows us that life will have its ups and there's not anyone who just had it easy. Even when Mary was going to have her baby, they couldn't even find a place to stay. They couldn't even find a place to stay. They in a barn. But like they went through, but what
no
God,
epidural,
girl, with some lambs looking at you
as you're giving birth, and you didn't even ask to be the, you know.
But like, it's crazy. But it's just like, but what God gives us is like, once you just like he gives you peace, he gives you these things in the midst, and that's so true. It's like you look at these ups and downs, and what he just showed is that people just stayed faithful. Yeah. He's just faithful in believing in his goodness and who he was, even when it was like, yo, this is crappy.
It sucks.
Bad, Lord. Like this.
Yeah. Job went in. He said, curse the day I was born, because you have taken me out. Like, I no longer know what's happening.
It's not, no, it's definitely not easy. But I think life is not easy in whatever form you choose to live it, and whatever you decide to live it as, whatever you want to believe. If it's not God, life, no matter what, is not easy. It's just it's not going to be. And from what I believe, which I believe, you know, Christ is the answer and all that, he never says that to be it. You know, I have so much. Okay, so something I want to touch on that you spoke of, and I think really also affects our perception is like how we view God, right? And one of the biggest things, like me being in therapy and stuff, is like a lot of people view God through the lens of their father, through their own father, right? So if your relationship with your own father is a relationship of you have to perform to get love, you will take that sometimes to your relationship with God. You need to perform to get love. For me, my father passed away when I was 13, and then my stepfather was emotionally and verbally abusive to me, right? So what my view of father was he's going to let me down. I'm going to give you something and you're going to let me down. Or you're going, like, there was no love with my relationship with my dad. Because of my dad's death, it was like, you're going to be there and you're not dependable. Fathers are not dependable. And so for me, I brought that to my relationship with God. And that's a big thing, is people do bring their father relationships to the relationships with God as a father. How was your dad?
Yeah.
Does that speak? That for me, that was true. And what I've heard people that's very true is your perception of God can be tainted by things of that nature, or people who are put above you or in charge of you, the way that they're teaching it or the way that they're using it will speak to you of potentially thinking that is how God is too.
Wow, that was really good. I think that a lot of my friends that I've had difficult relationships with their father, they have that perception of maybe he won't come through, maybe he will leave, maybe he will abandon me, maybe this one time I messed up and he, and I think it definitely speaks to that. With me, I have an amazing relationship with my dad, and he's, like I said, he's a pastor, and I think my view came more from church than it did him. Him, because God would always tell me, my dad would always tell me, God loves you, God loves you. Yeah, there's a purpose on your life. There's a purpose on your life. There have been moments where I was rejected from things, and I would call my father, and he'd be like, "Woo!" And I'd be like, "Why are you cheering? I just got rejected." And he'd be like, "You have to understand God's purpose." Like he was the person that like taught me, kind of the principles of God. But where I think I got a little lost in translation about my view with him was church. Was when I was hearing this, not when my dad was preaching, but the church that I grew up in. When I was hearing the doctrine, it made me think that God was this authoritarian and he is doing this on purpose and he is mad at me. And so there must be something I did for God to do this, for that for me to be experiencing in this in my life. What ended up happening was, I think that I was taught more that God was this lion and not that he's a lion and a lamb. And that was exactly what my therapist told me. So I remember one time I was like, I just feel like God is just taking me through this like tough season. And she said, "Huh? Wait, what are you talking like?" And that is when she started to break down my view of God. So what do you think of God as, Jasmine? And I was like, well, he's he can dictate what can happen in our lives. And she was like, yes, but do you forget that he loves you? Because when you are taught that God at the very core of who he is loves you, and that nothing can separate you from him, and that life will still happen to you as he loves you. And the way to get through that is to walk through that with him. That was the understanding that I really, really needed, because for so long I was like, well, I guess he's just up there doing that, and I don't know why this is happening to me. And I thought for so long that a lot of the stuff that was happening in my life, I thought it was a personal attack. I thought personally I must have done something wrong, and this is why I'm going through, not understanding that life has to happen to me. It's got to happen to everybody. I don't care who you are. It's gonna happen to you. And instead of taking it personal, understand that these things are natural and that you need to be able to walk with God in them. Now, we can make certain things happen in our life. Say, for instance, God say, don't do that. Don't go there. Don't get in that relationship. Then we experience things like that. Now, yeah, that is something that we have self-inflicted on ourselves. And I think sometimes when we self-inflict things on ourselves, we have a hard time forgiving ourselves and don't think that God wants to talk to us. And that's because that's how humans do us, right? When you tell your friend not to do something and they do it, and they come to you and tell you, you be like, I told you. And they're like, I don't even want to talk about it no more. That's not how God is. Yeah. That's not how he is. He's like, I love you. Yes, I warned you, but I also know my child. I knew that when I warned you, you were still going to do it. And guess what? I'm going to still work it out for your good. And I think that is like the deepest part that I really needed to learn about God. And I think it's beautiful that both of us, when we got into therapy, it helped our relationship with God and helped us change the perception that we have of him and to be in a more healthy manner. Because, you know, viewing God the way that I did was gonna mean that I was gonna be mad at him every time something bad happened, or I would blame him, or I would step away, or we would have a tussle in our relationship and I would just go further and further and further away. If I would have stayed on that journey, that's exactly what would have happened. And so I needed that perception of God to change in my life in order to really walk into what I'm walking into now.
That's so good. I believe God uses therapy strongly to help work in our lives. Yeah. It's so funny. We started one place and we got all the way here. But so I do ask you this. So as, you know, a Christian and seeing like, I'm gonna go back to kind of political stuff for a second, seeing like how, you know, a lot of white Christians are acting, what is your perception of it in the sense of like, when it comes to like, how do you feel like you are digesting / like commuting? I don't think that's the word. Oh my gosh. Just like how are you digesting it all in the sense of like God's place in it, or your role and like potentially like like I told you, like, you know, if I have a friend or something that says a viewpoint I don't agree with, like what has been like, so basically I've been thinking about this, right? It's kind of for me because I wanted Biden and I wanted Trump out, right? Mm-hmm. So that, like, Trump is out, it's like, oh, I have the power. And it's like, am I gonna just like punch people in the face?
I told you.
Yeah, like what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do with my power, right? Because when you had the power, you were like dancing on like my grave, you know what I mean? And it's like, you know, I because of what I stand on, like ultimately in my life, I am living for Christ. That's ultimately. So my point of view, my perception is coming from that. Right? So like, and I say that to say like, because I know some people are like, well, it don't make sense to do da-da. And it's like, but you have to understand, like from my point of view and where I'm operating out of, this is how I operate. So when it comes to that, how are you digesting it? How are you seeing like how are you reacting to it, you know?
Honestly, seeing both Paula and Kenneth Copeland, it upset me, but I was not shocked. What I think I had to understand is that people are going to think the way that they want to think. And I necessarily don't have any control over that, especially like I would probably never be in contact with it. And if I do, I would definitely share my opinion if I could. But I think it reminded me how people can abuse power when they're not flowing from a place of love and they're not flowing from God. And it bothers me, but it also lets me know that this is a season of exposure. When you think about vision and you think about 2020 vision, that means that you can see everything. And if nothing else has happened this year, is that we have been exposed to so much. Now, mind you, many of us knew that some of this stuff was going on, but now everybody is being able to see it. And so I think for me, it gave me a look at, okay, so that is how you're thinking. Well, we don't think the same, but I honestly don't think that I think like every single Christian. I think that, you know, my relationship with God is very important to me. I think that I understand that the words that I say, I need to watch because people are looking, and some of them, I might be the only God that they know. So I need to watch what I say. I need to watch what I do. I need to watch how I operate and how I carry myself. Those are things that I already knew. But I think in this season, it is even more important to make sure that you watch what you do and watch what you say. And so for me, when I see things like that, it's like, it's dangerous. But God, like, I really need you to not necessarily change the hearts of people, but please show them the truth. Show them that their way of thinking is not always right, and there is always room for growth. And I'm hoping that the people that are around them and the people that they surround themselves with, or the people that are in their circles, challenges their views and challenges their thought process, and ask them, do you think that that was the best thing to do, to laugh in the pulpit? Do you think that it was the best thing to bring politics on a religious stage? That extreme view. Do you think that? Do you understand the implications of what that just told everybody that does not look like you that you're about? Do you get that? I guess that's the only thing I can necessarily pray for, because like I said, I probably won't be able to cross paths with them. But when I have crossed paths with people that think differently than me, I just take the time to explain, this is what I'm thinking, and this is why I think the way that I think. And about I care about low income communities. I care about women being able to decide what they want to do with their, but I care about a lot of the things that align with Biden and Kamala. I care about a lot of those things. Have African Americans ever been brought up on the stage when somebody gave their acceptance speech? No president, I think, has ever brought us up. The African American community.
Well, Obama brought himself up, but that's just
Yeah. But outside of that,
yeah.
especially a white man saying the Black community, what? That's change.
Yeah.
And I know that everybody is not going to be agreeing with that change, and that's something that I have to be okay with.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. I'm not gonna lie. It's definitely difficult. And what I have to do is not to get my emotions so tied up into that, because you'll get mad. You'll stay mad. That's why I like would keep when people be watching the debates and stuff. I'm like because I'm gonna have an attitude.
Yeah.
You got to know yourself. You got to know yourself. And if I get into this conversation with you because I know that you're an extreme thinker, when I enter into a conversation with somebody and they say their views and stuff like that, and I see where it's going, and if I don't think it's productive, I say, hey, you're gonna think the way you think, and I'm gonna think the way I think. If we're not gonna have a productive conversation, I don't think we should continue to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think one of the most, like one of the most difficult things and necessary things that I think for us is to operate in a place of forgiveness, and operating in forgiveness. I think people. And I've had this, right? Because like, for instance, like I had to forgive my stepdad, and I thought if I forgave him, that means that all the stuff he did that was wrong, that he doesn't even maybe think is wrong, is just gone, right? Yes. Like it's not, instead of trusting that what Christ did was enough. Yeah. Who he is enough. And if he's calling me to forgive someone because he forgave me so freely, then I need to do that. That doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge the wrong. That doesn't mean that I don't set boundaries. And yeah. I think that the hardest thing, and the thing, to really realize is like, ultimately, like, I'm not going to treat them the way they treated me. And so I am going to operate in forgiveness, because y'all are making me mad over and over again. So I have to forgive.
constantly forgiving these white supremacists. They're crazy.
And but I think people think like, if I'm like, oh, I'm going to forgive them, or, no, that doesn't, just because I'm forgiving them doesn't mean that I don't think that they need to repent. Doesn't mean that I don't think that they need to be held accountable. But what I am saying is that I am not going to allow you and your choices to hold me back from doing and being who Christ has called me to be.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing that we have to make sure that we do, is, I don't agree with you, but what you say don't dictate what I'm going to do. And so, honestly, when, cause I watched Paula White, and like, was like, oh my God, that is so crazy. And then I watched it with my friend, and like, I didn't watch the part where she was supposedly speaking in tongues. And when I supposedly never heard tongues like that, but when I
never heard them either. I never heard tongues. I have not heard.
Never heard that.
Something I was dropping. I was like,
and so me and her were like cracking up when we like finally like listened to it. But I understand the thing that you got to understand about brokenness. People will always do things out of brokenness. They will say things. They will hurt people. It will always, the root of a lot of that, the root of almost all of that is brokenness. when you understand that people are on their own journey and they are not as evolved as you, or they haven't come to the understanding that you have come to, of course they're going to do things like that. When I saw that, I said, "Ooh, Paula needs some help. Paula needs some help. Kim needs some help."
No, Paula needs some help. You know, okay, real quick, it reminds me of Dave Chappelle. It was Dave Chappelle. Remember when he do the Rick James and Eddie Murphy? So it was Eddie Murphy's brother. Why am I forgetting? Charlie Murphy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Murphy said after they beat up Rick James because he was doing his feet on the couch, he said they were in the car and Eddie had turned to him and he was like, "Man, Rick really needs some help." And he's like, "We helped him. We just whooped his ass. What are you talking about? Like, we just beat him up. Helped him shoot." But it's like when you said that, like, Paula really needs some help.
She does. Like, a lot of people do, though.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I still need help in some areas.
And that's the thing, you know, it's like,
I don't need that much help, but yeah. There's a difference in the help we need versus that.
It's like to also in this, because I will speak for me personally, like I have to check myself because I am the type of person that will be like, well, I'm not that type of Christian, or I'm not doing this. And I have to humble myself to be like, I might not be there, but like, if things had been differently, could I be in that place? Could I be in that mindset?
Yeah.
If I had grown up the way she grew up, or believed the things she believed, or was a white woman, God forbid. But like seriously, like, and you spoke about it, right? You were talking about like the way that we even operate in our Christianity, you know, a lot of what we bring to it like affects that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it ultimately just comes back to like, you know what, Jesus, like, I'm not above anyone because just like her needing help, I need help. Mm-hmm. Now, just like her and like me, when I do things, I got to repent. When I do things, I got to go back to Christ. When I do things, I got to be held accountable for them. Those things aren't voided, just broken. But the fact of the matter is that we're broken and we're humans. And I think the realest thing that this shows is that these people, everyone is a human being. And like one of the things that came out recently that I actually appreciated their humanness, because I feel like sometimes when pastors do things that are, you know, out of what, you know, the holiness of how you see a pastor, they sometimes don't take full responsibility for them, or they don't work on it, or they just like excuse it. And so I really admire, God, what's his name? He was the pastor of,
oh gosh.
You know what I'm talking about? I love him. Gosh.
John Gray.
No, not John Gray.
Okay, because he has cheated on his wife 3 times. He is
not John Gray.
Wrong.
No, not John Gray. Not him. That doesn't something about that doesn't sit well with me. I'm just gonna leave that alone. You know?
Yeah, girl, that's a whole nother conversation.
I'm gonna leave it alone because I don't know. I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm only gonna speak for who I want to put my name in front of.
Yeah.
Carl Lentz. So Carl Lentz he's amazing. He recently, you know, is no longer the pastor. He got fired as a pastor for Hillsong, New York. And, you know, they wrote, you know how they write, like, for things that aren't, you know, there were some questionable actions, right? They give you like the fluffy language. And he made a post and he said, you know, my time there, it's been awesome. He's like, but I cheated on my wife. And he's like, and I did that. And I did it. There's no excuse for it. And he's like, you know, when you're running a church and you're operating out of yourself and you're operating out of dry places, you will do things that you shouldn't do.
Ooh, operating out of dry place. That really spoke to me right there.
That will speak to you when you're pulling from a dry well. And I respect him because ultimately, like, we fall all the time. Yeah. You know, I respect him. To me, in that situation, I've seen his character and the things and what he stands for. And I respected it. I really did. Because he didn't sugarcoat, he didn't hide it. He said, this is what I did. I take responsibility for it. I'm a broken man. And that's it, you know? And that's the reality. Yeah, I can't speak for John. I mean, honestly, I want to give John Gray grace. I think my problem with John Gray is the continuation of it.
Yeah.
But also he has, I don't know him, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
know God is working on people differently. But even before he got married, when he talks about their life before they got married, it sounds like he is a person that in their relationship dynamic has continually done things and hasn't changed. And there's other pastors talk, like, I like Michael Todd, and he talks about how before they got married, how he was a man that was cheating and all this and stuff. But it's like, you have to make a decision to change and really be changed.
Yeah.
And I think the problem, why John Gray, why he doesn't sit well, and it's not to say that he hasn't ever said anything. It's not to say that any of these pastors have never said anything that hasn't spoken to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that, because if you just say the word of God.
No, so when you're anointed, that doesn't mean that you're not going to fall.
Right.
You can be anointed and still fall. That's just the way that it's going to be. What I think the problem is there, and I'm going to look at my text, because we were just, me and my friends were just talking about this. It was me, my sister, and two of my other friends. And I was like, that is really, crazy that he's cheated, 3 times and has continued to have to apologize. At this point, it's like really embarrassing. And one of my friends said, that's real. I'm starting to think it's a generational thing with Black women in ministry, especially. I don't know, just a theory. My sister said, facts. They act like it's a badge of honor to be dragged through the mud, but that is not what God has for me outside of ministry. And so what I mean by that is, there were moments where John would say things when he was on the circle. I think he said that his wife went through more pain birthing his purpose, helping him birth his purpose, than she did birthing their children. Some people liked it, but most people were very upset about
Struggle love is not good.
it. Exactly.
Struggle love is false, y'all. Stop doing
Stop it. It's not, y'all. It ain't cute.
What's love got to do with it? Love is not enough. This is a PSA. I want you to hold your thought, but I want to speak to that.
No, for real.
Stop.
Let it go. It ain't it. And I think that begs the question about, when men in ministry say things like that, right? Like even William Moe Jr., he is he used to be an R&B artist, but now he's on a Christian radio station. Like, he's completely given his life over to God, and he talks about the things that he put his wife through. And then, Michael talks about the things. Sometimes there are moments where I think women can see that and say, oh, okay, I guess I'm just supposed to stick through it. And what you just said, struggle love ain't it. Yes, I believe there is room for forgiveness when it comes to every relationship, but repeated acts of things, repeated disrespect. I don't care if the man is I don't care if the man is a bishop, pastor, man on the street. I don't care who he is. Repeated acts of disrespect is disrespect. That is not love. And it bothers me that this continues to happen. Yes, truth. Yeah, transparent. Say, apologize, all this stuff like that. But it just bothers me, and I think it really just begs the question of how long will she take that? And when women see that, would they say, oh, okay, I probably need to stick through it as well?
No,
and
that's definitely a message that women are getting from other women, that you're supposed to just deal with it. You're supposed to just stick with it and go through it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just think that's I can just speak to like my own family and the things that were like taught from older women to the younger girls and the examples they saw. And so that's what they lived out.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that people can't
change.
Can't change. No, I'm not saying people can't change. I'm not saying if you're married and someone cheats, you don't forgive them. That's not what I'm saying. Yes. But I think there needs to be a full picture assessment. Like you really need to full picture assess it. You need to look at this person's heart. You need to look at what they're talking about, what their actions are speaking. Like, I do believe there can be something on the other side of cheating, but I don't think going through cheating is necessary. Like, I don't think it's a badge of honor. I don't think it's a badge of honor. And I think you have to pay attention to people's actions. and what their patterns and what they're showing you. And if they
currently, and currently, what are they showing you?
Currently, no, you can't do potential.
You can't do potential, and you cannot do history. You have to look at what are they presently showing me today, and does this still fit with where I'm trying to go? History. People say, I've been with this person for 4 or 5 years, so I should just, take it. And people in marriage, I've been married. I don't know what my life looks like. And you're right by family saying, the family saying that and society saying that. But what I'm also realizing as I'm rewatching all of the shows from back in the day, because they put all of them on Netflix, when I'm watching Girlfriends, when I'm watching The Game, that there is a narrative in all of those shows. Stick through it. Make it work. Keep going. Maybe you'll get me. Like, there is a narrative in all of those shows that I'm like, oh my gosh, we watched this coming up, not even realizing that these shows were giving us messages. They were giving Black women messages to just suffer through. And I don't think that is the life that, Black women are supposed to be living. I think Black women are supposed to be able to thrive in love, that Black women should not have to experience love that comes with pain first. Yes, you will experience things in your relationship. Yes, everything will not be perfect. But at the point of you losing yourself, or at the point of you being so broken in a relationship, and you still got to feel like you got to continue to go through because that's what you think you're supposed to do. No, that narrative has to stop. Man, when men publicly apologize and know that they have embarrassed women, when men are in these powerful positions, especially in the church, they have to be very careful with what they say when they are apologizing. Like what you just said, when you're flowing from from dry places, amazing. But what John used was Delilah.
Yes, girl.
He talked about Delilah.
That made me so angry. That was I couldn't remember it.
Because you essentially blamed the woman, but you were married.
Basically. So what you're telling me is you have not fully taken responsibility for your actions. You're not, and that was the thing with this, is he took full responsibility for his actions. He didn't blame his wife. Mm-hmm. He didn't blame whoever it was. Mm-hmm. He said, I made the decision.
Yep.
It was me.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't clearly see your role in something, how are you going to repent and turn away from it when you don't even see what you've done wrong in it?
Yeah. And so the Delilah message happened the second time. And I'm not sure if there's a third time that something happened, or he is now just fully taking responsibility. But now he said, like, I want to publicly apologize. I have been embarrassing my wife and things like that. And it's just, it's sad and it's unfortunate, but I do understand that people are human. But I want better for women. I want better for Black women. I really do. And I really, and that is why I push, even with my male friends, please go to therapy. Please start working some of this stuff out. Please be honest and transparent with the women that you're with. Like, if you feel, the temptation to do something, if you feel like you keep getting that temptation, let them know and say, maybe we need to walk away for a second so I can get my life, so I can get myself together. Like, I want more for Black women. And I don't think that some of the things that we are seeing played out right now is just that's not the best for them. And there are moments where I'm like, leave, go, get out. And, it's different in marriage. I can say that because I've just been in relationships. Like, I can't tell nobody to leave a marriage. I've never experienced that. But I really want better for Black women. And I want us to be able to stand up in our relationships and really say the things that we really want and we deserve, because we do deserve it. We really do. Everybody needs to be healing and in therapy and things like that. But some of the stuff that I see, that even, pastors and stuff like that talk about the things that they've experienced with women, and even people outside of the church. I'm just like, why you do that? Like, why did you, why do you continue to hurt, people that you claim that you love or that you have devoted your life to? But yeah,
people hurt people. I know that's a little saying, but it's so freaking.
No, but it's that's the saying that I stand behind. No context for that. Hurt people.
Yeah, and it's not an excuse. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. Because, like, think about how internally torturous that must be for you to love someone and see yourself treat them like that. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, we haven't even gotten to, like, potentially the spiritual factors that are happening, that are at work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've been like 2 hours.
Yes.
This wasn't even how it was supposed to go. So just ask you questions about you, but I'll probably just have this, and we'll have to do the other type of interview some other time. But
Okay.
I have to slice this up in two. But
Yes.
But even before we go, please tell everyone your name, because I don't even think you've said your name.
Yes, we went straight into it because we thought.
Tell everyone your name. Tell everyone where to find you. Tell them about anything that has to do with you, and if people want to find you and what you're about.
Okay. My name is Jasmine Newson. I am a speaker, a writer, a humanitarian, and I can be found on Instagram, JNewLove. I have a website, jasminenewson.com. And I have a blog on that website. I am actually currently writing a book about healing. You can see the series that I put on my website. I am also in the midst of starting my own nonprofit called You See Beyond, where I help young people find their purpose. And I think that's about it for me.
I think you can tell me if I can't speak for both of us, but I think I can speak for both of us when, even though, we've grown in our walk, we're still growing.
Growing. Yeah, always.
Growing. And ultimately, like any of us, like we don't know everything, but our heart is for Christ and for whatever he wants.
Yes. And I hope the people that listen to this are able to get a better understanding of how to get a relationship and how to really have that walk, and hopefully be able to dispel some of the myths that I think Christianity has told us, and also, talk about some of the crazy things that are happening right now in our nation with our supposed spiritual leaders. So, yes, they're not my leader. I hope they're not y'all.
Yep, and that's pretty much it. All right, bye.
Bye.
Okay, that was a lot, but it was so good, man. It was so good. I don't talk a lot about my faith on here. I'm not like hiding it or anything like that, but I just don't have conversations kind of based around like my thoughts, and a lot of times it's about hearing. Yes, this was a conversation where we heard both people's thoughts, but normally I do like to focus on the person I'm interviewing, so I have to do a more traditional interview with Jasmine. But it was nice to like have this conversation with someone with kind of similar thoughts about what's going on in this crazy town called the United States. You know what I'm saying? And if you guys can't tell, I really be holding my tongue because I can talk. Oh my gosh, I was watching this and I was like, yo, you be talking. Like, you be talking. Like, I was so excited. It was a lot. Anyway, Jasmine left you all of her information there at the end. Please go and follow her. If you loved this interview, go share it. Please rate, subscribe, review. This is your first time here, and this first time you're hearing something from me. This was a little bit different, but I do different kind of interview series with Black women, and normally I just do interviews telling the stories of Black women I meet and interviewing them and hearing about their lives, but it's all about making a platform for us to speak and be who we are and to share our thoughts from our point of view. So I really hope you enjoyed. Check out at the IPW or Instagram. If you have any questions, email me at info@theipw.com. Other than that, have a great week.